Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tack. Today I have an opportunity to work on an oldie but a goodie. David sent this one in. Thank you, David. And we're going to show you the Shakespeare 2711. It's kind of a classic reel. I kind of like this. This is an interesting feature. It has the bail trip arm on the outside of that little protective cover as opposed to the inside. You'll see when it loads over this way, and when it trips, kind of releases it and pushes it back. Just like that. Slides off of a cam in the back here. And just a fun little feature on this reel. This reel was made in Japan. I'm guessing late 70s. And beautiful reel all around. It's sluggish. So David sent me a couple of other reels. They were well maintained. This one seems to be well maintained as well. I'm just going to guess that we may have a little bit of dried grease in there. All right, we're going to take off the external pieces and parts. That includes the spool. We'll service the spool later. We're going to remove the handle. Now, always my advice is look to the other side of the handle, opposite the crank, and see if you have a button there. If you have a button that is spinning when you are turning the reel, then you have a cap screw. If it's not spinning, the chances are that the handle is screwed into the main gear. But every now and then, if that cap's not moving, this one does not have a cap, it's by design. But every now and then you will find one that has a cap, that has a screw hiding behind it. So just make sure you know what you're doing, because if you try to unscrew, assuming that this is screwed into the main gear, you're going to rip the arm out of this, and well, the reel isn't going to be any good. So to remove this handle, you have to remove this side plate screw first. And what I like to do when I do the removal of that screw is I like to put it right back into the handle. That way I kind of keep track of it, don't have to search around for it when I go to reinstall. Sometimes it's easier to put back in than others. Okay, here we go. And then what I do is I'm going to take all my pieces and parts, put them into a parts tray. That's nothing more than the bottom of a fast food container. Okay, we're going to service the spool later. We'll just bring that off to the side. We're going to take a look to see how the rotor is mounted. And there's usually two ways you can remove the rotor. And that all depends on where your side plate is. So if your side plate is loaded below the rotor, this one is loaded below. You can see that the case stops right here, and it continues over to this side and down. Well, then you don't have to do anything about removing this. You'll be able to take the axle shaft out from underneath. If your case mounts inside the rotor, and that's some of the more modern reels do that, then you're going to have to remove the click ratchet and the spool shim and remove the axle from on top so that you can get rid of the rotor in order to give you access to that side plate. In this case, the reel was made before that became popular, and we're going to just take these three side plate screws off. So this is a 30 size reel, and it's appropriate for river, inshore, ocean, pier, casting. Very versatile reel, and the 30s and 40s are probably the most versatile. They're between the freshwater reels and the saltwater reels. And within the saltwater reels, the most versatile is the 50 size reel. And on the freshwater ones, the most versatile reel would be the 20, as it kind of spans the lights and the mediums. All right, 3 screws are there. That should allow us to remove the side plate. This notice when you take this off, the positioning of this anti-reverse, and notice that there's a little spring here. It might be hard to see, but that little spring just came loose. And when you go to reinstall, you can't leave that spring trapped in the case. That spring actually tucks into the side case like that. It might be hard again to see, but now you'll see that the spring is below. So don't panic. That's the way it mounts, but be careful to observe that if you are doing this reel. Now this reel doesn't have bushings. It has a case that's been machined to accept the main gear here. Again, don't worry. As far as this spring is concerned, so this spring has a little hook right here. It's kind of hard to see, but there is a hook on the arm here. So that hooks the back. It goes around the screw, comes out and lodges in the back. So when compressed, it's pushing the anti-reverse dog that way. So when you had that spring sitting outside the case, there was no tension and the beak wasn't in. Now this one has an override. We'll play around with that when we go to reassemble the reel, but I did want to take a moment to show you that. It's a big main gear, so the ratio on this one is probably pretty good. I'm going to guess around 5 to 1. All right, sometimes we can take the main gear out directly, sometimes we can't. In this case we can. And here's what I was kind of referring to. We got dried grease on the main gear. It's just overloaded there. And what's happened is, over time, the grease that was on the teeth just kind of spun out by centrifugal force. There's a cup back here on the main gear, and that kind of collects all of that stuff. And you can see it's just a gummy paste right now. It's not doing any good there because there are no moving parts there. So we want to take a moment just to clean that old stuff up. You want to check the teeth on that main gear as you're doing this. You want to make sure that all of those teeth are properly aligned, that there's no chips or cracks. And as many times as I've said that, I say it for a reason, it happens. And it happens that I just got a reel in the other day from Mark. It was a 402 Mitchell, and it had flat spotted out. There was about 4 or 5 of these teeth that just didn't look the same as the other ones. And when you look at the profile of the gear, that's a telling sign. So they were all flattened down. There were no points on that main gear with Mark. So check them this way and check them this way. Make sure that you see a symmetry to those. Okay, so you got two pieces of this main gear. You got the main gear, which is going to drive the rotor, and you have the back gear off the main gear, and that one, that's going to drive the oscillation gear to make the axle shaft go up and down. So just like that other gear, there's a lot of dried grease in this one, and you need to take a moment to clean that grease off. So I'm just going to use a pick, and I'm going to just kind of run through each one of those little channels in between the teeth. And just to make sure, you can see it's just coming out in chunks. So that would be another reason why the reel would slow in performance. It's got to kind of mush its way through the old grease to kind of to push up those pieces. All right, so we're good here, I think. I'm putting them on a paper towel. I don't want to clean out the gear and have it go on my bench and then transfer all that stuff to the next reel I service. So we've cleaned this up. We've checked the teeth. It's time to just do some fresh lubrication on this one. Please use fishing reel greases and oils when you do your reel repair. Don't settle for household or automotive products. They're just not designed as well for marine environments, for water intrusion and the like. They'll work, but there's a lot of disadvantages to them over time. They evaporate quicker, they bog down, they dry, they do other things. All right, that's all done. I'm going to put that into the main parts holder. We're going to come over here and we're going to work on the rest of this. So no bushings, 2 cases, 2 slots in the case that are there to accept the main gear. Now we're going to take the screw out of the crosswind block. You're going to take pictures along the way. If I haven't told you to do that already, please, if you're working on a reel that you're not familiar with, take pictures. I'm kind of doing that here. I'm doing a video, but you don't need to do a video. Just stop for a moment, grab your cell phone, grab a digital camera, grab whatever you like, takes a picture, and take the pictures. That way you'll have reference points along the way. And it doesn't just apply to this reel, it applies to all reels, because it's so easy to flip or misalign a part or put it in the wrong position that that mistake could be costly. All right, we're going to do the same thing here that I did with that handle. I'm going to take that screw that belongs in the axle shaft, and we're just going to get it started in there as a convenient holding place. So, this is a good picture. tells you where your crosswind block belongs. That's this piece. Where your crosswind gear is. Notice that when I did this, the stud on that crosswind gear was below. And you want that below because that'll give you the clearance when it comes time to reassemble. You got to put that screw back in, and you can only get that screw into the crosswind block by putting that stud low. And why did we take that crosswind gear off? Well, for the same reason. We just have a lot of dried grease behind there. Dried grease is almost like a glue. It's just going to impact the performance of the reel. And that's what we felt when we tested this. The only thing we felt was sluggishness. I suspect that when we go put some fresh oils and greases on this thing, that this reel will pretty much fly. Well, I've yet to figure out if we've got a ball bearing in here, but it's a nice design on the reel. I'm just cleaning up some of the case. Now we'll come up top and we'll remove the rotor. Take those two pieces, put those into my parts tray. That rotor is probably a 12mm nut. I have a deep socket. It's a hand tool. It's a Mitchell tool. You're not going to be able, chances are, you're not going to be able to fit a wrench in here because of the lip on the rotor. So get a socket from one of your socket sets. Now I just turned it as you would traditionally do, counterclockwise, to remove that, and I felt it tightening the nut, which means that this is a reverse thread. So you want to pay attention as you're doing that. Don't fight the thing. If you can't move the nut, try turning it in the other direction. And that's to keep that nut from getting loose as the reel turns at the reverse thread. We have a nut, good place to take a picture. We have a little collar, and then we can remove the rotor. This rotor is clean underneath. As I did mention, this is kind of an interesting one. It has an external trip lever as opposed to an internal trip lever. Seems to be working fine, so we're just going to put a little bit of oil in there. Make sure that it flips several times just to work that oil in, and leave it alone. Now you do not need to remove bails during your basic service. I can't tell you how many times I get bails in because people have removed them and well, couldn't get them back together again. But if it's just a basic service, do what I did here. Just grab a penetrating oil. That'll loosen up some of the dirt if there is dirt behind it. Of course, if you got a broken spring or something, you're going to want to remove it. But do the same thing you were doing with this trip lever there. Just work the oil and let it clean itself up and kind of move on. I'm going to put those two pieces for the rotor right back inside there into my case. And all we're left with now is a bearing. So there is one bearing in this reel. We're going to take these two screws off. Notice the positioning of the screws. One is a Phillips head screw below, and the other one is kind of a tall collared flat blade screw. This one is acting as the bail trip. So if you put those screws in backwards, what's going to happen is that your bail trip is not going to fire where it normally fires. It will fire, but it'll fire 180 degrees away from where you're used to it. And a lot of times that's important because as you go to set your bail, typically it's designed so that it flips away from you when you're casting. And if you've turned this into an opposing one where it's over on the other side, well, the problem you're going to have with that is that the bail wire will probably get in the way. Now I'm looking at this. I think I have, no, maybe not. I was thinking maybe I have two different size threads, but it looks like they're both the same thread. So remember, the tall one goes to the back of the reel. This should just pull out now. I wasn't getting lucky with that. I was just noticing how clean it is. So that's one of the things you want to do. When you look at what do you do for a normal service, well, most of the time it's a matter of cleaning the reel, checking and replacing any worn or broken parts, and then just relubricating it, cleaning it, relubing, oil and grease, get it back out there again. There's a little bit of dried grease up on the top, so I'll do the same thing I just did with the other one. Just going to use this little dollar store pick to as a point. You don't need this tool. You can use a toothpick for all that matters. A little nail. Don't use anything that's going to damage the treads, but you don't need anything fancy to do reel repair. You can see basic tools I'm using here are just wrenches, and screwdrivers and a little bit of experience. All right, nice main gear. We're going to do the same thing here. We're just going to go ahead and get our brush. I use a brush for the greases. You don't need to use a brush. Any way you want to apply it, go right ahead. I use an artist's brush. I just find it's comfortable in my hand, holds the grease, and this one doesn't shed. But if you do use the brush, every now and then just take your paper towel and pull it away from you like I'm doing here, and if there are loose hairs in there, they will pull out and get lodged in the grease there. Next up then is the burring. We're going to use fishing reel oil on that as well. I'm using Lucas's fishing reel oil here, but I don't have a preference. Anybody's fishing oil will do, so long it's designed for fishing reels. All right, this is a clean channel. We're going to go ahead and replace that. There's a little shim washer that goes on top of the bearing and below the rotor. Now we have that little plate. Remember what we said, the heavy screw, this one, goes to the back. If you didn't remember, take a look at the picture you took. You did take a picture, right? And we'll take the other one, which was the Phillips head, and put it in this one. That one's hand tightened. We'll come back and finish that one. So if you like these kinds of videos, if you want to see more, please subscribe. If you do subscribe, hit the notification button. That'll let you know when I've posted a new video. I do post frequently. And you'll make a determination as to whether that's a reel you want to see how to go repair, or maybe you own it. Maybe it'll tell you how to fix your own reel, or maybe you'll just be in it to learn a little bit about the reel. And maybe if you see one in the marketplace and you want to buy one, you'll kind of know what's underneath the covers. That's kind of what this one is. This is an oldie, but it certainly can fish for a long time to come. And I'm sure David will get years of enjoyment out of this particular reel. All right, this goes in. Remember what I said, stud side faces the bottom of the case. Next up, we want to make sure that we get some fresh grease in this little cavity here, which is where that stud's going to ride, and a little bit on the sides, which are going to ride in the channels. And you need to make sure that you've mounted that over that stud. It's real easy to put this in, think you're on the stud, and you're not. And then when you go to reassemble, all of a sudden you got a problem. I'm going to take the axle shaft, I'm going to remove that little hold down screw. Again, light coating on this one. Don't go crazy with the grease here, because when you put this in, any excess grease is just going to kind of fly off the inside of the pinion gear. Before I can put the axle shaft in, I need to reattach the rotor. Rotor goes on. Now there's two flat sides to the rotor. You need to find those. Line those flat sides up with those two bars. And then that tie down clip will fit inside. It won't fit inside unless you've done it that way. I'm going to grab the nut. Remember, we took this off in a reverse thread, so to put it on you have to turn that counterclockwise or towards you, and then make sure it's nice and tight. Again, use an automobile socket or anything in your wrench set that can reach inside that cup. All right, next up then is the axle shaft, which goes through the bottom one, which we mounted. And then you need to align the hole in the axle shaft with the hole in the crosswind block. And now that tie down screw can go in. And there's a couple of different screwdrivers you use in this, so I always like to keep my screwdrivers, a variety of them, kind of within easy reach. In this case, I've got a smaller Phillips head screwdriver than I had with the one that we used to take the case screws off. All right, the entire main gear has been all lubed up with the exception of A little bit of grease on that side for the case, so we can go ahead and reinstall that. And a little bit of grease to get that into the case on this side. I'm going to move the anti-reverse up to on. That should give me the clearance to put this back piece in. So what's going to happen here is that button, the flat side of this button right here, is going to push down on this lever to release. So if you put that up, you should have no problem putting this in and on. And it doesn't appear that we have a problem there. Make sure that the seams of your case are nice and tight. If you're finding any kind of distortion, if you feel like you really have to press to get that on, something is out of alignment. In this case, chances are it's that anti-reverse dog. So just take your time, be patient. Don't be afraid to take it back off. It's not a race. And take that thing back off. Take a look. See if do a visual inspection of it. See if you can't solve it that way. All right, I'm just trying to get one of these started. If you have questions on this reel or any reel in particular, leave them in the comment section. I'll try to help you out with your response, whether it's a history of the reel. This one is a Japanese-made reel, probably in the 70s. There was a lot of beautiful Japanese reels made at that time. They were contract manufactured, so Shakespeare did not have a plant over there. They relied on somebody else, a shop that was specializing in it. And I believe there were many at that time manufacturing for the U.S. So what happened was that was the first wave of offshoring with the U.S. manufacturers going abroad. And in Japan, you had a lot of name brands, Penn, Shakespeare, and others that used the Japanese manufacturers rather than doing the production of these spinning reels domestically. Why did that happen? Well, spinning reels were just introduced after the war, and they really didn't become popular, or the war being World War II. They didn't become popular until the 60s and 70s, and the Europeans were the first to do the reels. Everybody will be familiar with the Garcia Mitchells and the like. And then the Japanese got involved, and companies like Daiwa and Shimano and Ryobi and the like, and their technologies and their way of manufacturing far surpassed the startup pieces that were being done by the U.S. manufacturers. Shakespeare has an interesting history with the spinning reel. Shakespeare did not start manufacturing the fishing reels. What they did was they bought Langley. Langley was a aircraft manufacturer who turned to spinning reels post-World War. And they bought Langley in 1958. That was their entry into the market. They kept the Langley brand around for a while. And then generally after that, they started marketing under the Shakespeare name. And then again, like we said, as the Japanese reels and the like started to be far superior in technology and the like, well, they just they moved their piece overseas. All right, we've got the up top to look at here. This is a top drag system. I'm going to go ahead and grab the pick again. It's a very versatile tool that I use here. Kind of comes around all there. There is a spring clip. It is a spring and it is a clip. It has a spring, it will shoot. That rides in a groove inside your spool. And then we have a series of drag washers in here. These appear to be a leather kind of a washer. Drag washers up top take a lot of abuse because all the water that's coming off the line kind of lands in that tunnel there. So you want to make sure of a couple of things. You want to find out what you got. I think we have leather washers here. Leather washers are permeable, breathing kind of things, so you want to get grease on those. You want to make sure that they're not brittle. In this case, I tested them. They got a lot of wobble left in them. They certainly have enough meat on them. And then this is what's called a common 6-drag setup. You have 2 keyed washers. They're round on the outside and have an oblong inside. And the one in the middle is called a eared washer. It has 2 tabs on it that grip the spool. So the 2 oblong washers grip the axle shaft, and that's how you tie it all together there. This one holds the spool, the other 2 hold the axle shaft. You'll notice it's round in the middle. And when you tamp them all down, you're holding the spool and the axle shaft. That's how you're getting dry. You're noticing I'm dipping it into the dry grease, and I'm using my gloved hand as a tool to just kind of spread it in. Don't glob this stuff on and leave. You don't need to put too much on it, it'll only squeeze out. But you need to put enough on there to keep it flexible and keep it going for years to come. All right, that clip goes back in now. Find the inside of that little ridge that it rides in. There's not a lot of tension on these, but please make sure that as you're doing this, you're keeping your finger on it. Again, it is a spring. Just going to grab a little pad here that's got some rod and reel cleaner on it just to buff up some of the old dried salt. We'll come around here then, put the spool onto the reel, and grab our drag adjuster knob, tighten it down, make sure it's holding, then we'll give it a final test. There we go, we're tight. Once you tighten it up, when you're ready to take it fishing, use it, whatever set it and forget it kind of mode you want to be in. When you're storing the reel, back this off. You don't want to squeeze down those drag washers. You don't want that grease to dry and to cause any kind of breakage on those. All right, let's give it that ride. Nice. That's a nice reel. Very smooth operation, and again, single ball bearing, no bushings on the side, using the case as the bushings. And wow. All right, we'll test the bail. There you go. So let's just find out where that's firing. So you can see it's firing over here, and when you go to cast, you're over here. So typically what's happening is you're taking your line from this and you're grabbing it with a finger to cast, and the bail is out of the way. Now, when we were back there doing those 2 screw sets, if it wasn't that way, the bail would be on this side when you went to cast, and it'd be much more of a problem throwing your line. There you go. David, nice reel. Thanks for sending it in. To those of you that have a reel that you would like serviced or repaired, well, if you contact me by email on the business card that follows, I will be happy to provide you with reel repair information. So this is a great time to say thanks to our first responders, uniformed personnel, and essential personnel. Thank you for all you're doing during the pandemic to keep us safe. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.